Hello, 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 you guys. Welcome to Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson, where we talk about conference. Sorry. Clearly, my drinks from yesterday during my birthday dinner and drinks are still, heavy on the brain, on the dome, and confusing. My word. Okay. But Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson is a platform in which we talk about controversial issues that affect the Black and brown and melanated communities in America and abroad. We like to talk about these issues because these issues do generate a certain motivation in our viewers and a certain motivations even in myself to start having more conversations of the like, right? And I do feel like the topic of conversation today is going to definitely segue into what we are rapidly approaching and calling a thing in the chaos that's happening right now in America, right? And around the world, essentially. There are a lot of things that I have noticed kind of in my little moments of reflection when I get by myself and I really start to thinking and I really start going. And believe me, I can think, I can go. But once I kind of get with myself and I start kind of looking at the way things are unfolding in the world, I tend to have more questions and I tend to ask more questions and I tend to do more research and kind of sometimes find myself going down a rabbit hole because I like to see where there is symmetry. There are a lot of people out there that are, how you say, conspiracy theorists, right? And I'd like to give those people, a little bit of credit because some of the things that they have, suspicions around the possibility of conspiracy around, some of those things definitely have credence. Like there's some validity in some of these things that we've suspected were, in a roundabout way, conspiracies. There are a lot of symmetries that I draw between the here and now that we sit with as far as our economy, economic strife that we're going through, political strife that we're going through, disease, famine, recovery, that kind of stuff. And of course some of the things that we've seen kind of happen over the course of COVID and post-COVID, right? There are a lot of symmetry areas. I don't know. Maybe you guys don't know. Maybe you haven't been paying attention, but hey, I'm here to put you on. Okay. So without further ado, I'd like to jump into today's conversation. I do have a bit of this conversation where I'm focusing on some of the specifics of comparisons between women of the 20s and women of the 2020s. And I want to kind of see if you guys notice what's different and also the comparison between what's happening right now and what has happened to us in the past as a nation of people. So without further ado, let me go ahead and play this countdown and I'm going to pull up my little notes and we're going to get ready. Grab yourself a drink and a snack and let's talk about these things because I am here for accountability today and I hope you are too. Well, here I am. Welcome back. So let's jump into this conversation. today. Before we get into that piece where we're having that comparison about the women from the 1920s and the women of the 2020s. 2020s. That's a tongue twister. Jeez, gosh. Yeah, I be setting myself up sometimes, y'all. Sometimes I do. Okay, before we get into that, we're going to delve deep into relationship talk. I want to know specifically what you guys' qualifying process looks like, what draws you into a person. Like, what's the thing that makes you tick? What's the thing about a person that draws you in, that makes you say, you know what? I think I want to be with this person. And I want to know whether or not you even have a qualifying process, kind of like a process of elimination or something that you find that you do specifically that kind of informs what potentially the relationship that you find yourself getting into. During the dating phase, are there things that you do to make sure that it solidifies what your relationship phases will look like? Because what I do notice is very similar to back then in comparison to here. Women are faced with a unique challenge of how it is that they prioritize their perception of their freedom and liberties as women. Um, so you had women in the 1920s becoming acclimated to voting, learning what it looked like to be a woman who is now liberated, learning to see what it looked like or what specific things that men did, but women were previously shamed against doing. They wanted to walk into and do. There's a lot. There are a plethora of issues, and I'm going to run down the whole list, okay? Because I made some notes, child. But I think it's interesting because what I see in the women in the 2020s, modern day women are essentially just another. They're the same. It's not a lot has changed, believe it or not. It's almost like we're going back in history, and maybe the reason, I think, because we don't know our history well enough. And like I mentioned in the description below here, there is I feel like there is a specific area that I want to point out that is a little bit different, but I feel like that's still some of the same as well. Because women were very much into fashion back then, independence, freedom, creating designs that express them and wholeheartedly welcome their freedoms. And I think that women today are doing that too. I just think that sometimes, we can go a little bit too far. I feel like sometimes women in the 1920s, they went a little too far too. I mean, probably because I'm like an anti-smoker or whatever. I don't smoke at all. But I think walking around putting a woman with her beautiful two fingers on a cigarette and smoking is not the move. I just don't think that that's sexy. Now, those are my thoughts and my opinions only. Not saying that you guys got to agree, okay? I'm not bullying you into agreeing, but I think that it's not sexy for a woman to be smoking because you stink. That's my opinion. And if you don't like it, you're welcome to put your negative comments below and all that good stuff too. But I just think that a woman smoking is not a source of enticement or appeasement. And I ain't a man. Some of them might find that to be quite feminine. I don't see how, but they might. Who knows, right? I'm open to suggestions or whatever comments. But those are my thoughts. I want to know from you what draws you into a person. Are there any specific qualifying processes that you find that you go through to guarantee what your relationship looks like on the other end when you're dating or vetting a person? I want to know those things from you. I will talk specifically as to what things that I have found consistently work. And yes, you guys are getting this information for free. You're not having to book a session. What I have found consistently works without a shadow of a doubt, is tried, true, and tested, is people starting off or leading with what questions might inform their non-negotiables. And I feel like we live in a society now where everything is kind of just a little free. And that's all right. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech with limitations, unless you say something about the president or COVID or something like that, and then they block your post from being seen by other people. But I don't know. There are some freedoms. That's what I'm saying. Okay. There are some things that are inalienable, and there are definitely freedoms. And I think that with those freedoms comes a little bit less restriction, right? And I feel like sometimes people have a tendency to not create healthy boundaries because they feel like they won't be welcomed, right? Or accepted by the people that they want to put themselves in front of. And to be honest with you guys, we are going to talk a little bit about that today. But I think sometimes, to some degree, that's a problem in and of itself. And I think that we have to be people that are willing to call a thing and take accountability for those things, right? So in my clinical practice and helping people establish sound relationships, what I find works is sometimes the things we have to notice, the things that will lure us in without question, right? And we have to challenge those things. And I know you might be thinking, like, but what about that person's so fine and they so this or they are so that or they turn me on? Not all times are we going to encounter a person who meets the aesthetics that we're looking for and also meets the intellectual things that we're looking for. I think that that's the reason they've termed the phrase like beauty and brains, because it's not oftentimes something that you see a woman have naturally go hand in hand, right? um you don't naturally see a very attractive man with skill sets and money and financial stability and wealth, you know. I don't even know if there's a way to coin that. I'm gonna coin that high value man because I know y'all got the things that y'all think are high value, but a man with solid morals, solid ethics, solid skill sets, workmanship around his home, handyman skills, career, wealth, financial stability, and all of that. If I'm a single woman anywhere, send him to me. Okay? Like literally. But those are the things that I think are top tier, high qualified, high value male, right? Now, these are not oftentimes interwoven into the perfect person. Okay. Sometimes the man ain't gonna be fine, but he'll have like all of the other things, right? And sometimes the man won't have all the other things and he'll just be fine and that's it, you know? And you can say that you have a high value man, right? So that's it. That's your guy. But those times don't present themselves often enough, in my opinion. So, what draws you into a person, typically aesthetically, those things are not the specific things that I think may be on your qualifying list. So, I think it's important that we go through a process and find out what makes us our best version of ourselves, jot it down, list it. I always say things work better when you put a pen to paper. When we're thinking and we're talking off the top of our head, oftentimes we misspeak or we miss things altogether because we're not having a time to process and reprocess those things. It's coming out, going pen to paper, and then being reciprocated back into, again, as we're reading what we're writing. So there's that, right? Put down the things that make you your best version of yourself. Put down the things that create space for you to step out of being the best version of yourself. Maybe a part of you that you don't necessarily like, or doing things that you don't necessarily like, or you think are uncharacteristic of you. So you devise that list of things. And I always say keep it very slim. You don't have to go out here and create a list of 400 things that are you. Hell, I hope you've been getting to know yourself the whole time that you've been yourself. But I digress. Some people don't, and that's fine. List at least 10 things. Make it a simple list. It could be 10 to 20 things. Sometimes people like to do 25, so they got 50, right? The things that are on the list of things that you find bring you out of character or make you not necessarily be your best version of self. For example, you might find that when you were younger, very younger, I'm hoping, you were risky and not responsible, and that you took a lot of risks that led to a lot of consequences. Okay? That would confirm that you were risky and not responsible. Now, let's just say that's the version of you that you used to be because you were a child, right? Or young adult. You weren't necessarily fully adulting yet, mature adulting yet. If you find that that's the thing that you always happen to go back to during moments that you're with the type of people that lie to you, try to manipulate you, gaslight you, back you into a corner, that kind of stuff. Those are things now that are on the list of non-negotiables because you don't want to see that version of yourself. That version of yourself is not the best version of you. It's actually a version of you that you don't even recognize. You don't even know that person. That ain't even you. When you see that person on a video, somebody play that back, that's plausible deniability. It's not me, right? The realities are these are things that are boundary markers. They are indications that someone has stepped over the boundaries that you have that are naturally within you. Naturally. So you put it on a piece of paper and you say, liars, manipulators, thieves, or whatever works for you that goes on your boundaries list, right? These are things that just don't bring out the best of you. They're not conducive for the best parts of you. And not all of these things that go on the list that you find are your boundaries, not all of these things are going to be things that make you a negative person or presents a negative part of you. Some of those things just may gross you out. Okay. For example, I'm anti-seafood. I don't want to be with someone who eats seafood. Why? Because it smells like fish. Why? Because fish is filled with chemicals that are negative in the in the ocean, and it's it's just really disgusting. And the texture is also disgusting equally. And some of the disease and infection that we get from marine animals, that's also very disgusting. And you can cook it out, but still, again, it's the smell. I don't want to smell that. That don't smell good to me. Some of you like smelling like fish. That was the thing on last week's show. You should go back and watch it. But that's the thing. You are what you eat. You smell like what you consume. No, I'm not even with that. So at the end of the day, that's something that I know is a no-go for me. So I'm not going to try and change you. If you eat seafood, if that's your thing, you do it. Do you and do it well. But I don't have to be with you in an intimate space. Many of my friends consume seafood, but I don't sleep with them. I don't have to smell their fishy odor. Do you? Just don't do me too. Okay. So that's how I feel about that. So what are like some of the things that you just don't like, right? Maybe you're a person who is super into fitness. You want to hike, you want to work out every day, you want to make sure that you're consuming all of the water, you eat very healthy, right? So obviously a boundary for you might be a person if you're wanting someone to join in with you and do some of these things with you. A boundary might be a person who is not athletically fit, a person who does not like the great outdoors, a person that doesn't want to work out at all, or any of those things. Could be a plethora of them. And you think that these things are not important right now, but the realities are they're long-term important things, because you want to target the small things. Because the reality is we are who we are right now, but we're only a slice of who we are dedicated to becoming. We don't know what that looks like. We know not the time, the day, the hour, whatever, that we will leave this earth. But I can guarantee you one thing: you won't leave this earth not a second before God is done with you doing the process of becoming that He already intended for you. And so what that looks like is, as you're going through and navigating your journey, it is our journey to, and our intentions to, and our job to learn a little bit more about ourselves as we're evolving, because we're constantly in a state of evolution, right? So as we're taking notes and we're learning the person that we're evolving into, it would behoove you to just go ahead, make this list, and find out what makes it conducive for you to be the best version of yourself, right? After you have finished compiling this list of boundaries or non-negotiable things, put them into qualifying questions, right? What's an easy way for you to find out? We're going to go off mine because I don't see any from you. When and if you catch this on a replay, because I do feel like this will be a fairly quick video, because I did not film yesterday because it was my birthday and I was okay. Don't ask me no questions. It ain't your business. Mind your business. But so there you go. But so in the aftermath of you actually getting all of these things down, right? Listed 10 to 50, 10 to 25, and then 50 total or 20 total, right? After you've gotten those things down, you're going to develop questions that makes it easy for you to identify if these are things that are boundary breakers. You're not just going to put them out there as they are, because the realities are people will know that you're asking them boundary questions and they're going to answer in a way, that fits whatever they think you're expecting. Okay. So a good way to ask if a person consumes seafood is like, okay, I think that's a good one. Okay. What kind of food do you like? What are your favorite foods? What kind of foods are off the table for you? You're not putting it specifically out there. Now, you could specifically ask the question of, what do you eat seafood? Because if it's a hard pass for you, well, child, it behooves you to find specifically out whether or not that's a thing that they consume or even are open to consume or even consume twice a week or whatever, right? If you want a person who is 420 friendly because you're a 420 kind of person and you know that that's what floats your boat, you know that that's what gets you going, you know that that's what you need every day. The way that you would ask that question is, hey, what do you do in your recreational time? Do you smoke at all? Do you, dibble and dabble a little into a little ladle? Right? I don't know how y'all put that because I don't do that. I got my own high. It comes from within. But ask that question however you would ask that question, right? If you're looking for a person who specifically does certain types of drugs, but doesn't dabble in the other types of drugs, you might want to ask, like, do you have a limit? Do you pop pills, or do you just drink, or do you smoke and drink? Do you use needle drugs? I don't even know how you would ask that. Like the party? Fuck, I don't know. Don't ask me. Ask yourself if that's what you're into. Figure out a way to ask those questions, okay? Pushing past that, after you've done that, then spend some time with that person. But if you find that you're naturally drawn to a person and you've met them out in a natural setting, out in public, give yourself the space and time to sit with the possibility of whether or not this is a temporary infatuation, or if this is like seriously magnetism, where you find that spiritually you're inclined to be drawn to that person. There is a particular energy pulling you there. I always say spend some time away. You can get the digits. Not telling you not to, but spend some time away from that person so that you can solidify your suspicions about your vetted interest in them. So maybe give it like a week. Call back. If it's still good, if it's still hot off the press, then perhaps there's something there. If it isn't, perhaps that was just a momentary infatuation. And it's okay for us to call a thing and keep it moving. Reality is, if it is something where spiritually you guys are linked or meant to be together or whatever, cross one another's path in that way, it always comes right back. The God we serve is very interested in doing those things, making things circle back around that we happen to skip across for our own selfish needs. All right. So moving on to the next one. Dating online or in person. What is your preferred process? That's what I probably should put. I want to know if you guys prefer dating people online, meeting people online. I'm feeling like I could have restated that. This is an aha moment for me, you guys. So perhaps I should use vetting online or in person. And I dating, you can tell me how you feel about online dating too, because I feel like you can date someone online as well, but I do feel like there are two separate and distinctive things. Dating online would be setting up a time to do an online video conference. We may set up to be at a restaurant. You were at one and I'm at one separately. we might be long distance. Or maybe I'm just a person who really doesn't like the in-person meeting thing, right? I think those are both possible scenarios that would require dating a person at a distance dating instead of doing an in-person date. But I think what I meant when I put this was online or in-person vetting. So that means searching for the person that you intend to date, like searching for um compatibility with yourself and another person. That's what I mean, right? I want to know what your processes look like. What is your preference? Okay. So, marital distress talks. Let's talk about this. How does one end up in a relationship with a person they barely know after being married for over 20 years? I kind of hinted towards that earlier, right? When I said that we're constantly in a state of evolution or we're constantly evolving, we are becoming our true version of ourselves. Every single day, we're closer to that final. This is me, right? And every single day is another opportunity to grow yourself closer to who you're meant to be and reach your full capacity or whatever. I think that when people have relationships for the course of 20 years, it's 2 decades. You go through so many developmental phases over the course of that time. And you are going through those things at the same time that life is lifing. And you're going through some things in life. And those things in life mature you sometimes, and sometimes they bring you to a state of retardation where you find that you're slowed and you're not making as much progress, right? I think it's very important that we are mindful of the fact that when we marry, we are not marrying the person in front of us. We're marrying what that person stands for, the capacity we see in a person. As a woman, and really even as men, oftentimes, because you see men complain about the thing that they don't like about women all the time. Men are okay with women evolving and gaining a little weight, moving and shaping themselves in a different way, but letting yourself go completely, girl, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Changing up your aesthetic completely, don't do it. Don't go cut your hair. I cut my hair off one time. I ended up on the couch in my first young feat of marriage. Okay. So don't do it. It could happen to you. And couches are comfortable, but they are not comfortable when you are sleeping on them repeatedly, day in and day out, during your time that you are at your home. Don't do it. So you're not necessarily marrying the person that is in front of you in the moment. You're marrying the potential. When you like a person because you feel like they possess the qualities that would properly align with you as you're growing into your true self, right? So you're searching for somebody that is compatible with the evolution that you are about to embark upon in life. Essentially, that's just what it is. That's the thing. So it's very possible that you could be with a person for 20 years and whoever they've evolved into has fought every element of your developmental phases over the course of your adulthood as well. As a result of that, you have a tremendous amount of pent up hostility and resentment. Um, Especially, don't want it to sound like I promote cheating, right? Because infidelity is infidelity. You and your God, right? Not mine. But if you have not cheated on your spouse emotionally or physically at all, and you've been very dedicated to them for that 20 years, the resentment and the hostility that you have as a result of them developing into something that didn't necessarily complement your growth and your maturation over the course of the relationship, your personal growth and maturation, right? The level of resentment and hostility you have increases fourfold oftentimes because you feel like you've not gained, you have no wins. We're all looking to win in one way or the other, right? So the reality is, I think people end up in those relationships with people they barely know because they never spent any time getting to know them, setting boundaries for themselves and their relationship, respectively. And then there's this other piece. Oftentimes they lose sight of who they're becoming because they're so focused on their partner, who they are becoming. So your partner then becomes a distraction for you. Unfortunately, it's not healthy. It's not a healthy distraction. If it's not a healthy distraction, we need to let it go. It's important for us to allow life to unfold and be curious the whole time, and to not find ourselves stuck on the one thing. Once you find yourself stuck on the one thing, you cannot focus on the other things. There are so many things that you lose sight of completely because you're like tunnel minded, right? Tunnel, not tunnel vision, but tunnel minded. You don't think about anything or consider anything else that you may be noticing or seeing. You just don't. And there's the reason that happens. Okay. So let's go to this very interesting topic and talk about it. Read about it, talk about it. So, did women break the world 100 years ago? There is an old saying that still holds true for today, because what we saw is that the economy crashed. The world was in a state of depression like never, ever before. Prior to this, right? After the establishment of the country and all of its interesting components, you saw us go through a serious decline, right? In the beginning of North America's women's movement to freedom, right? In 1750s ish, right? Um, you see us kind of women and men that are escaping from British territory. Women are clinging to their husbands, right? That's what I'm trying to say. When you're escaping from what is considered to be oppression, or a state of a nation that you don't know, you no longer feel like identifies with what your goals and dreams are, and you truly want to be free, you see people navigating to a new land, right? To create what they would think to be stability for the family, for those women, for those men, for those people, for their children. So I think there became greater challenges once women kind of got settled, and you know, give it another 50 to 100 years later, you started seeing more challenges kind of come about. So that's around the time that we had like challenges of citizenship, right? Women actually being active citizens who could vote. And of course, there is 1875, the abolitionist movement, and that sort of thing. Women getting rights, slaves getting rights, citizenship being determined, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things unfolding, leading to what we see in the 1920s. We notice women now deciding, well, if these things can change, and we are now considered independent citizens, freedom, we have the freedom to be, think, do, move in whatever way we want, perhaps we are equal to these men. We will publicly smoke, we will publicly use slang and curse words, and we'll just live our best life. We'll be whoever we want to be. If we want to have friends that are males, without question, we will have friends who are males. Don't question whether or not we're sleeping with them, because you're gonna question a man? Yeah. Mind your business. Don't question me. I'm gonna do what I want to do. So what you see is those women are the women of the 1920s. Fashion and spending money frivolously, these things were the epitome of who women were back then. And to be honest, there is validity in saying that women broke the world of America back then right just before the 1920s, because there was a lot that we didn't consider, like the Great Depression, right? The economy failing, back then. So what we see is, what's her name? Eleanor Roosevelt. President Roosevelt gets into office. Eleanor is at his side. You know, she's a different kind of woman. But at the same time, she represents freedom. She writes about freedom and what that looks like for women as we redefine who we are, how we come from behind a man, but now are beside the man, right? Beside him and encouraging him to do these great things. And it has long been said that Eleanor Roosevelt is a person who promoted the overall health and well-being of her husband, but also motioned him to do more and more things for a failing economy, right? So I think it's really interesting the way that pans out. We're coming out of a Great Depression and we're in a state of disarray. Now, the only thing that I will say is that this time around, the government did something a little bit different by bailing out the banks. However, it put the government, the federal government, in unprecedented decline and debt. I don't understand that. Mm-mm. That one, we're going to have to table because the math still is a math thing for me. So I don't know if that's really an improvement from back then or not. But I will say that women of the era back then and women of the era back now, I mean, right now, considering the MGTOW movement and all this stuff is post-COVID stuff, right? I think women now deciding to divest from men and letting men go on their way and do what men are going to do because they're not going to respect us, they're not going to wife us, etc. I think that mindset is one very similar to some of the women back then. Although the vast majority of women still had the goal of marriage in mind back then, but we weren't in a financial strife like we find ourselves in today. To me, I mean, yes, the banks were bailed out, but I think that our current sitting president is delusional sometimes when he says that we are not in a state of economic decline. I don't know what people he's saying is going to work. Maybe they just ain't filling out the census. It's inaccurate. Speaking of which, I got my census and I need to fill it out. But twice. Got 2 notices. What, do they give you 3? I'm not gonna try and see. I'm gonna fill out the damn census. But maybe these people are not filling out the census, and maybe the numbers are not equating to the realities of employment versus unemployment. But the facts of back then is when Roosevelt took office, I remember there being like a quarter of the United States population that was unemployed. Unemployed. Like suffering, broken, in poverty. Like not being able to get anything. Nothing. No help. Just out here. Now, I really feel like that's where we are now. What I do notice is that's a marked difference between then and now is that there was not like an influx or uptick in violence or whatever back then, but our state of our union and our economy was the same, and women kind of led us in the same direction. Now you see women definitely being into fashion and trending and things like that. The what they wear, how they wear, what they wear matters a tremendous amount right now. It really does. But they're more naked. Liberty, right? Liberties, freedoms, liberties, women, exact same thing. Women were liberated back then. It led to them just publicly smoking and taking on a different take on what they could wear. So they would wear pants proudly in public, would smoke publicly, would say what they wanted to say, go out and party publicly, have male friends, and be okay with being seen with male friends, but not necessarily seeking to court this guy because she wants to marry him. Like these things are things that women were doing freely and openly, right? Dating just to be dating and figure out what options she's got out there. Have sex if she wants to before marriage. Doesn't have to go through the process of betrothal. or arranged marriage. All of those things changed. And so the women back then, if we're making a direct comparison, we're kind of unhinged the same way that we see some modern day women dating 100 years later. So those are my thoughts. Right. Those are my thoughts. Okay. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm very curious to know. I'd love to hear from you guys. When you catch this thing on the replay, I'd love to hear you answer each of these questions that I've asked over the course of this very short show and discussion. I want to say this, right? I do feel there are so many things that have changed with women and so many things that have changed with our society. But I do see there still being room for us to dig ourselves out of the hole in which we place ourselves in. Oftentimes, I talk about the fact that women can be the beginning of and the foundation of something great, or the demise of and the end of something terrible. As women, we do have that power. It's not one that I brag about or I think it's a beautiful thing. It's a blessing and a curse because you have the power to speak life into your children, to your spouse, to your friends, to your loved ones in a way that no man ever could. No man ever could. You have the power to support in a way that no man ever could. But we do see some things happening to where women have fallen from grace. Times two, I think, in my opinion, and found themselves lost in re-identifying what it means to be a woman and what power they can harness in being a woman. And I feel like when we become those kinds of people and we become that level of bitter, maybe we stand in the way of a lot of progress that the world can make. Sometimes we got to call a thing a thing. Guys, let me know your thoughts about today's show. And again, I do not apologize for my absence on yesterday. It's always going to be about me. This month is 100% about me. And I also want to note that we will not have a show at all next week because your girl will be on vacation. Okay. Birthdays and vacations, they matter. They matter. So get yourself some good sleep tonight. And I hope that you have positive vibes flowing through your veins and that you're emitting positive vibes into the atmosphere around you and all of that good stuff. Hopefully you guys are staying hydrated. Stay hydrated. I do want to encourage you guys to stay hydrated, stay cool, do what you can to access and take advantage of some of these cooling centers they have around, different places in different cities. And do what you need to do for yourself. Keep self congruent and first and nothing else. Right? Okay? Love you guys. Much love, light, and power your way. Later days. Bye.